This is Belle. You know her from Beauty and the Beast. You know this dress. And this one. But are they accurate? We got this fashion historian.
Hello, my name is April Calahan, and I'm a fashion historian at the Fashion Institute of Technology.
And she's going to walk us through what Disney got right and what they got wrong about these dresses. First, let's establish a time period.
Pre-revolutionary 18th century France.
Great.
We know this because the aristocracy still exists.
As we all know from the movie.
A young prince lived in a shining castle.
Let's start with the yellow dress.
Right off the bat, we know that this bright, intense yellow color was probably not possible in 18th century France. Before the invention of synthetic or aniline dyes in 1856, all colors were sourced from natural dye stuffs, including plants, minerals, and animals. Yellow colors tended to be pale buttercup or even a deep dark mustard with a brown undertone. Our second clue that Belle's dress might not be 18th century is the shape or silhouette. In the 18th century, the volume, as you can see in this fashion plate of Marie Antoinette, came directly out from the hips, whereas Belle's skirt is, well, bell-shaped.
So this is not accurate. Let's draw Belle's yellow dress from the undergarments up. First up, the underwear.
During the 18th century, the very first layer of undergarment that both men and women wore were known as a chemise, which was either made of cotton or linen. For more than 400 years, women's undergarments consisted of the chemise, over which was worn the corset.
That's the next layer.
In the 18th century, corsets kind of created a conical shape, emphasizing a very narrow waist and raising and lifting the bosom. The corset in the chemise is just the very beginning. We have more foundation garments that go on to create the silhouette.
That's the third layer.
To create the volume of the skirt, women were actually wearing basket-like constructions strapped around their waist. These were known as panniers. Panniers were often made of either wood, cane, or even wire. So as an aristocrat, your panniers would be wider the higher rank you are. Some of these skirts were so wide that they had to enter and exit a room sideways. Belle's dress, the silhouette, is actually far more 19th century than it is 18th century. Here we see a fashion plate from the 1850s. This is remarkably similar to the style of dress that Belle is wearing.
The fourth layer would be the petticoats.
Over the pannier, layers and layers of petticoats would be worn. Petticoats could weigh up to 15, 20 pounds.
And then the gown, which was in multiple pieces.
Your gown wasn't exactly like we think of a dress today because it didn't close in the front. It was more of like a long jacket.
The second part of the gown?
And in order to fasten your gown over your corset, you would be wearing what's called a stomacher. And a stomacher is a stiffened triangular piece of textile that your gown would then be pinned or sewn to keep the front of your dress closed. Women were literally sewn into their dress each and every day. Let's face it, 18th century fashion was not comfortable.
Finally, we have to look at Belle's hair, which for this time period is missing a huge component.
This is a pouf, these extremely trendy, fashionable hairstyles which were created partially by a wig, which might have an understructure of wood or wire, and then the wearer's own hair would be arranged around this. The height of some of these poufs could be 1 or 2 or 3 feet even.
Like we said, huge. So here's what Belle would have looked like compared to the original Disney look. Oh wait, one more thing.
You will also note in 18th century fashion, gloves were not so much of an important accessory, fans much more so. Certain movements with your fan could be considered flirtatious, and you could even answer yes or no by placing the fan on one cheek versus another.
So finally, this is what Princess Belle would have looked like. Now let's look at Belle before all of the dancing and singing with inanimate objects. Belle's blue day dress. Belle lived in a provincial town.
There must be more than this provincial life.
Was her blue dress appropriate for an 18th century commoner?
The two main things that are wrong with Belle's look in town is that she's not wearing stockings and she's not wearing a hat.
So this is not accurate either. Now we're going to draw every layer of this dress. Her underwear would have also been a chemise. The next layer would have been stockings.
Regardless of class in the 18th century, all women wore knit stockings. Thigh were essentially like thigh-high tights, but because elastic had not been invented yet, you had to secure the stocking to your leg by tying a ribbon just above the knee.
And then the corset.
Even working class women during the 18th century would have been wearing a corset, and this was considered proper and modest. In this particular image, we see a male corset maker fitting a corset to this woman. It was actually legally mandated that only men were allowed to make corsets, and this was all part of the 18th century guild system.
Next, the silhouette garment.
The silhouette of her skirt is not supported by the panniers that we spoke about earlier. Instead, there's a certain softness to it. Beneath this would have probably been what's called a bum roll, which were padded tubes that were worn tight about the waist.
On top of this bum roll would have been multiple petticoats. And then the next layer.
A caracal being a short jacket that tended to have a little flounce in the back. And this would be paired with a skirt.
Over the garments was the apron.
One of the things that the animators absolutely got right was the fact that she's wearing a white apron. During the 18th century, clothing and textiles were tremendously expensive, so to protect and care for your clothing, working class women tended to wear aprons over their textiles.
And she would have worn a hat.
All women wore bonnets, caps, or hair ornaments. To display your hair in public was a signal of sexual availability.
Finally, the last piece.
This little kerchief around her shoulders is called a fichu. Because the corsets forced the breasts up and out, every once in a while there was an occasional nip slip, and the fichu prevented that and provided a little bit more modesty.
So here's what townsfolk Belle would have looked like compared to the Disney version.
The Disney animators have taken design and aesthetic references spanning several different decades to basically create a romanticized, fictionalized, historic past. And this makes the film, indeed, a tale as old as time.
And that's what Belle would have worn if she lived in history.